Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. This is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Right now, I'm doing a very exciting series showing my entire process for 3D modeling a pinball machine. In today's episode, we're going to really be focusing on the next step, which is 3D modeling the sand castle for the pinball to go through, as well as the bumpers for the pinball to bounce off of. So that'll be a ton of fun, and let's go ahead and get started. Just a quick note, if you'd like to find the other videos relating to the pinball machine, I have them all in a playlist, so if you check out my channel's page, you'll see the playlist listed there. Here we are inside of Cinema 4D. You can see that this is about where we left off on our project. So we're going to continue from here. You can see that I have this in the RKT Voxel mesher. If I turn this off, you'll just see that it's very voxelized inside of the volume builder without it. And if I turn off the volume builder, you'll see that this is our original mesh we were working with. So it's been pretty fun. And today I want to focus more on the little details, including on the inside. And I'd like to go ahead and use some more of those Boolean functions that we talked about inside of the voxel mesher. So I'm actually going to drop in a cylinder here, and I'm going to make it quite a bit smaller because we're going to be building a castle in the corner, a sand castle. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit and bring this up. So as you can see in my sketch, actually, because this is about collecting things on the beach, including coins and seashells and all of that, that we are creating this castle here in the corner, and then we're also going to create some bumpers and fun things like that. So the castle will be a really great project. I'll actually put this on my other screen. The castle is a nice way to practice the Boolean functions that we had covered for the volume builder. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. But it's really nice to have this machine to scale and to have that time setting it up, because then we know that the interior where we're putting all of these elements in is truly... I'm going to turn off the symmetry there. We know that all these elements in here are truly more realistically sized when we know the existing object is more accurate. So it was really nice that we were able to get dimensions of an actual pinball machine and 3D model accordingly. So I'm continuing this here. And I'd like to add in a cube. So I'll go ahead and drop in a cube to my scene. And I held down shift so that it would be under the cylinder while I added that in there. And I'm just going to drag it out on top. I'll make it a little bit smaller. Let's make it 5 by 5 by 5. And I'm going to want to rotate this. Or another option of how we could do it before we rotate it is we could really build this out inside of a null, everything together, and then rotate the entire null to get it that more dynamic angled look. So I might go ahead and do that actually. That sounds better. So I'm going to move this on over here. I'm going to add in a null. So here's our null. And I actually want our null to be in the center of that cube. So I'm going to drop it under the cube and basically zero this out. So I'll hit this button down here at the bottom and hit Reset Transform, and that makes it in the center of the cube. Now you may remember that a nice easy way to have the axis of objects line up with the floor is to go into your asset browser and go under your nodes and search for geometry axis. And then we'll get this in here, and you can just drop this underneath objects And as soon as you do that, you can see that the null is at the bottom of the cube. So that's super helpful. I'm going to reset transform again on the null just to make sure it really is lined up with the cube still. So that's our null, that's our cube. I'm going to move both of these together. I have them both selected with Shift. And if I'd like to, I can also hit Control, that's Command on Mac, and just also duplicate this and put it under the cylinders, so that now we know the cylinders all have their axes at the bottom, which just makes it easier to move them around. And we want these all to line up at about 95.5 centimeters, it looks like. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it in the Y dimension for each object. That way we know that these are all level and lining up. Of course, this is on an incline, so we'll eventually need to angle this possibly, or adjust the bottom, but we'll worry about that a little bit later. Right now we can just get these set in space. If we want these to be symmetrical, something that we can try is even using the symmetry. So we talked about that and we used that for the eyes of the octopus up here. I turned off the symmetry, so right now he just has one eye. But we could have him have two eyes, and with the symmetry on, we could do a similar thing and make a symmetrical castle here. So I may go ahead and do that. I'm going to hold Shift with the cube selected, and I'm going to add in a symmetry generator. And the reason why I held Shift is because then it adds it in the cube and automatically makes the axis the center of the cube, and it's just easier to make sure that when we put the cylinder in here that it will be symmetrical. So our symmetry right now isn't to the right setting. It is around the X, and we need to switch it to the Z. And the idea is we're going to put these inside of a volume builder. So I'm going to drop a volume builder in here. I'm going to drop both of these within our null, our cylinders and our cube, and I'm going to name the sand castle. Once I do that, I can drop that inside the volume builder. And you can see that our voxels are way too large to see anything that's happening. And we may need the voxels to be smaller for the details in here than for the exterior. So maybe I'll try 0.2. So that's looking better. And if we look at our volume builder, right now we have the null in here, but if we want to... Oh, you know what? I'm going to pull these out of here. And I'm going to put the null right here. So I want the null and the volume builder to line up, but now I'm noticing that the volume builder doesn't have the axes in the right place, so I need to fix that. So I'm going to just right now, with everything out of the volume builder, I'm going to hit reset transform while the volume builder is in the null that we had lined up. It's a lot of making sure your axes are lined up while 3D modeling. And then once we do that, we can place these back inside of the volume builder. And we can put the volume builder in the sand castle, so then we can see everything is nice and organized and neat. We have our symmetry on, and then our volume builder will also have the objects underneath it listed here as children. And I like the input type to be child instead of link, so I typically put these under the volume builder rather than dragging and dropping them in there, because I feel like it keeps the object manager just more organized and you can move the whole thing easily under a null, which is the point. Now we're going to need a little doorway here for the ball to go through. So we're going to need, I'm going to say, a cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and drop the cylinder and the volume builder. And I'm going to reset the transform so that it lines up with the volume builder. It looks like it's disappearing right now because we actually have these all set to union. So we're going to need to shrink down our cylinder, and it actually needs to be set to subtract. So we need to make the cylinder a lot smaller so that everything isn't disappearing, and that's the problem. So for right now, I'll just make this something really small, like 2. And as soon as I do that, you can see that now it's making a hole in the top. This needs to be turned around. So Z was not the correct direction. Let's try X. I actually think it looked cool going the other way, so that could be a nice little doorway as well. I'll think about it. But there we go. Now we have an opening to our castle. Something that would be nice is to have that part of the castle where some parts are raised and some parts are lowered, because castles were designed for defense. So what I mean by that is that they'd have little ledges going around so that people could fight and see what was happening while still having something to block them. I'm going to reduce the height of this cylinder because we don't need it so big. I might increase the rotation segments a little bit. And what's nice about this is once we do it on one cylinder, it'll automatically happen on the other because we have the symmetry on. So I need to make this editable. But first I want to make sure that the rotation segments for this cylinder and the symmetry, I want to make sure that this is an even number so that it looks nice when we do this, and it is, so I think it'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit C to make this editable. You can also hit the button here. Both do the same thing. And I'll go into edge mode and I'll use the hotkey ML to use the loop path cut tool. I'm going to solo this. And you can see that because we have the geometry axis affecting this and moving it up, our cage is lower. That's annoying me, so I'm just going to turn off the geometry axis for a second, and then we can take a look in here. So I'm just going to add this in here. I held down Shift, but you'll notice that's becoming raised because we still have, from the last time we were working, preserve curvature on, so I'm going to turn that off because we're no longer trying to preserve curvature. And now we have a nice loop going around here. And I want to go into the polygon selection. And I want to turn off the symmetry here for a moment. So right now I have the geometry axis off and the symmetry off. The reason why we're still seeing our symmetry here is because I left on this button and I forgot. So I'm just going to turn that off right now. And now I can select individual polygons going around here with this soloed. Just do that. And then I can hit MT to extrude them, click and drag off in space. And that looks a little bit more castle-like in my opinion. So I think that's nice. Now we can turn this back on, turn back on our geometry axis, turn back on symmetry, and we are having something that looks a little bit more castle-like. Now I think it'd be fun to have a few more of these, so we can continue working on the cylinder. We can duplicate it, so I'm holding control and making a copy, and then I can just move this over. But first I need to do that in model mode so that we're moving the model and not the points. I'll just move this over a little bit further back. We don't want to block this entrance here because we still want the marble to go through. Another possibility is we could just subtract all of these from that tunnel, and that could work as well. So maybe I'll do that. We still want the marble to be able to go through. And I would also like to add some height to these. So I'm going to go into the polygon mode. Make sure that I have this selected. I'm going to turn off geometry axis, and I'm going to solo it so that I can see what I'm doing. Grab those there. If you're having trouble selecting everything, make sure that you have visible only off so that as you select that top layer, you're selecting what you need. Make sure you aren't selecting anything you didn't mean to in that process though. And then I'll just move this up a little bit, and you can see we made it taller. Now something to think about as I'm looking at this is I really don't need these loops here. So I can use UL in edge mode and just click on those loops and then use MN for dissolve to get rid of them. And this is a little bit of simpler geometry because we didn't really need them there. And now with that done, we can turn back on the geometry axis and you can see that's taller, which looks good. And I can move this over a bit. Now this cube I think would be a little bit more fun if I adjusted its size a little bit and also added those ridges in it. So I'm going to add some more segments. It looks like I need to add them in the Z direction. Something like this would be good. And as soon as we do that, I can use ML and make this cube editable with this button here. Then I can go ahead and add in a loop in edge mode. Right here, I can solo the cube so I can see it a little bit easier. And I'll go back into polygon mode, click on my selection brush, and I can select these individual polygons. Now something that I wish I did is picked an even number just so that things are symmetrical. So we can undo this and add in one more loop. So if you ever make this mistake, it's not a big deal. So I used ML to add in a loop, UL to select the loops. I'm going back into edge mode. I'm going to select all of these guys in here. And then in your mesh modeling tools, you can find equal spacing under your move. So I'll just hit this and then click and drag, and you can see they're all equally spaced again. I can go ahead and move this over here. And we're good. So everything is fixable, and it's easier to fix if you know the tools. So I do have YouTube videos covering all these tools we're using right now. If you'd like to give them a try, I'm going to click on those again, use MT. And if I'd like to extrude this the same amount as before, it's saved that amount, and I can just hit apply and I'll do it again. So now we're good. I'm going to unsolo this and click away so that it moves back into place. And you can see we have this nice little castle here. If we turn on our volume builder, we just need to go ahead and verify that we still have this hole in the back. You can see it's kind of working. I think I need to rename this cylinder hole because now there's a few cylinders in here and that's a little confusing. And our cylinder hole needs to have more height so that it goes all the way through and creates that hole. So now our pinball can go through the castle and it'll look nice. And it's that cool voxelized style. And once we drop this into the voxel mesher, it'll be able to turn this into a bunch of little cubes. If you want to have an idea of what that looks like, and you have the RKT Voxel mesher, you've bought it, you can go ahead and drop that into your scene. I'm going to reset the transform of this so that it lines up with the castle, and then I can just put this in here, and you can see that this is kind of what it looks like as a bunch of cubes. And I think it looks really nice. I think it's a cool stylized thing. And then we can color the cubes later to look more sand-like, and I think that'll be nice. Something that might be fun is to make some little seashells on the front, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to drop in a cube for that. I'm going to make it really small, 1 by 1 by 1. And I'm just going to reset the transform so that's in the center. So we have this cube here, and we need this cube to look a little bit more like a seashell. And we also need to decide where we want the seashell to go. So it could go here, maybe on each pillar we have a little seashell, and that could be cool. So I'm going to go ahead and solo this. And as soon as I do that, I'm going to turn off the volume builder for a moment in the voxel mesher so that we could just see our cube and work on this. I don't think that we need too much depth to this, so I might pull this back a little bit. I'm holding Alt so that I can do that in smaller increments. And then I'm going to go ahead and make this editable with the C hotkey. I'm going to have this, grab this top polygon with the selection brush, use MT for extrude, click and drag, and now this is moving up, which is great. Now we can use T again to extrude, or not extrude, scale this direction. So I'm going to click on this little green guy here and do that. Now we're going to need ML to add in some loops here, edge loops. And then I'm going to click the plus button a few times. So now it looks like it's something that could be symmetrical, which is good. And I'm just going to turn back on our symmetry. And I'm going to click on these points in point mode, and I'm going to move them down. Now I want to have these polygons selected, but I want to do something a little bit different. When I extrude them using MT, I want to turn off preserve polygon groups so that I am extruding each one of these individually. And then I can hit T and scale them in at the top. But I want to do this per polygon. So I want to scale these in, but you can see that they're being scaled in all as a group, which I don't like. So what we want to use in this situation is actually the normal scale. So you can find the normal scale in here, I believe. You press the M button and then you'll see the normal scale hotkey is M hyphen. So we just need to click the hyphen, and then you can see that we're scaling these all in individually. That looks much better. I'm going to grab my points in here and just move them up. So you can imagine that this will look a little bit more seashell-like once we add voxels to this. And we're doing a very stylized thing. I'm going to T and just go like that to scale it out and then move it up. So let's see what this actually looks like inside the volume builder. It looks a little bit more seashell-like in here. And later on, we're going to be able to paint the voxels. And when we do that, you can paint the voxels so that they look a little bit more seashell-like. I'm going to turn on this and just unhide everything. Going to turn off the symmetry. So I think that I found a little bit of a bug where things disappear unless if you turn on and off your axis, which is really weird. But everything reappeared again. So I turned on and off that geometry axis and that fixed that. I don't know if you saw that weird glitchy thing that had just happened. But that's how you go about fixing it. That worked for me anyways. It's a relatively new tool. So I'm sure that Maxon will fix it. And if you notice that problem, you know how to fix it, but it's very possible that it won't even be there if you're watching this in the future. It's a new tool and they make adjustments with time. I'm going to drop the seashell into the symmetry. So we have 2 seashells on both sides. Super fun. If you scale them up, you can see them a little bit more in greater detail. How big do I want these seashells to be, is the question. This is a little bit of the challenge of doing the voxelized style because you want things to still be readable, but you're also working with something that feels a little bit lower res because you're turning everything into cubes. So you need to be able to show more with less in a sense. But I think that looks nice. And we have our castle going. So that's super exciting. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. If you haven't already hit save on your project, remember to do that because it's scary whenever you lose everything. So that looks better. So that's the first element that I wanted to build in here was the sandcastle. Let's just build out some of the elements and then we'll arrange them. I also wanted to create bumpers. So I do have some bumpers on my mood board, I believe. I also watched them in slow motion and it was really interesting to see how they work. There's some in here. These are bumpers. So you can see that they're usually very cylindrical, but they have these 2 plates on them that when the ball hits it, they both close and push the ball off. So that's why you see the ball bouncing off of these really fast, is because when the ball hits the metal plate, it actually activates it so that it closes and pushes the ball back. And it's extremely fast, and it's really hard to see unless if you watch it in slow motion, which I was doing on YouTube. It's very interesting. But this is basically what we need to make now. And it looks like they're usually held on with 2 little screws. I don't even think that'll be visible once we voxelize it. So I don't know if we need that exact detail in there. But I think it'd be good to start off with a cylinder. So let's create these. Going to make that smaller. That actually seems like a good size for a bumper, minus the height. So let's reduce the height a little bit. And I want to move this up to about 95. Reduce the height more. And there we go. Something that I did want to do is I like the idea of putting little seashells on top of the bumper, so I still want to do that. For height segments, I think we'll be okay with this probably. And I'm going to hit the C hotkey to make this editable. I'm going to go into polygon mode, use UL, select these two. We're going to use MT, and this time we are extruding inwards, but you'll see we left our preserved groups off, so I need to hit undo, make sure to have that turned on, and then do it again. So that time it looks much better. You'll see we're missing those little plates. So when this is voxelized, I'm not even sure if you'll see all of that, but I want to go ahead and add them in there in some sense. I'm thinking about what's the easiest way to do this. We could use something like a torus to show that. We could also try modeling something in. I'm going to dissolve these two loops to start off with. So MN for dissolve. Can also dissolve this with MN because we don't need that. I'm going to use UL. Select this and select this. Select those two groups with loop selection. UL is the hotkey for that. I'm going to hit copy, click away, and then hit V, Control V, or Command V if you're on a Mac. And you'll see we made a duplicate of that. If I solo it, you'll see I just have those polygons. Because I want to make my life easier. And now I can just select the loops in edge mode. UL again for loop selection. And I can select this. I can select this. Hit T. Scale them in using the Y handle. Sometimes that works, except that it looks like I accidentally enabled the axis, so I need to turn that off and try again. And I can see that this looks a little bit more like the part that pushes the ball out on the bumpers. So that's good. And then usually there's this little metal screw also there, so I'm going to hold Shift and add in another cylinder, make it really small. Smaller than that. I'm kind of just eyeballing this for right now, since I don't have an actual pinball machine in front of me. And this is very stylized, so again, it doesn't have to be perfect. But we need these here, because this pulls open and close the bumpers. And these plates screw onto it, so I'm just gonna put these guys here to represent that. That's good enough. And now these are gonna need some thickness to them. So we're going to use a thicken generator. There we go. I'm going to rename this bumper pushes ball. I don't know what that part is actually called, but I'm going to name it that and put it within the thicken. And then I'll change the thickness to something like 0.1 and see how it looks. I think that's fine. I'm going to unsolo, and there we go. We have something that looks a little bit more bumper-like. I think I might reduce this bottom part a little bit because the ball is supposed to slide in here. So let's see what we can do with that. This is the cylinder, so I'm going to use UL in polygon mode. I'm going to just go ahead and delete that, delete the bottom, and then I'm going to use MD to fill in this hole in the bottom. And there you go, you can see that that's filled in. And I have grid on, and then I can use UN to select that surface there more easily. UN. Okay, there we go. Now we have it selected, and then I can just move this down a little bit. I still might extrude this a little bit because it just seems too flat, and things aren't usually like that in real life. And the voxels might not take it as well. So there we go. We've got a bumper going. Very exciting stuff. I want to put a seashell on top of this. I wonder if the way these are put together, I want to look at my mood board again. If these bumpers are put together by having those go all the way through, it doesn't look like it. It looks like the screws go on the opposite side of those threaded rods. So I don't think I need to worry too much about that. I'm going to name this bumper body. There we go. And now I need to grab these edges in here. UL, select MS to bevel, and I'll click and drag off in space to bevel that a little bit more. Because that just looks nice. It looks nice to have a little bit of a bevel on there. I'm going to steal the seashell from the sandcastle. Should have named it Seashell. Oh, I did name it Seashell. Good job, past self. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it. Maybe I didn't copy it well. Control C, Control V. There we go. We got a seashell in here. So this seashell, where is it? I'm going to go into model mode. Try to find this guy. Rotate him around. About 90 degrees. I'm using quantize in increments of 5, but it might be easier to use it in increments of 45 when you're doing 45 and 90 degree increments often. I want to still have the Y facing up, so I'm going to go into enable axes. I'm going to use R and just rotate this up 90 degrees. And I don't know if you can see this, but I can see the numbers really small on my screen. They're a little hard for me to see at times, but you can see it, the increments show up really small sometimes. There we go. Now we have a nice little seashell on our bumper. I'm thinking of rotating this around this way. About 90 degrees again. Move it back. Something like that. So now all of this is making up our bumper. We're going to group these and name them bumper. So I group them using Alt-G, hotkey for that. Volume builder. Castle. I'm just going back and making sure that I'm naming things because this is a complicated object and with everything inside of it, and after a while it'll get a little confusing. And ideally we'd like this bumper. Oh, you can see that our null that we put everything into isn't lining up with the center of the bumper, so I'm going to pull those out, put the bumper as a child within the bumper body, hit reset transform. You need this button clicked on to be able to do that, and then it'll be in the center. I can then take out the bumper null, Put everything back inside of the bumper. Hit save. There we go. And it should be lined up a little bit nicer. I'm going to put this inside of another volume builder, actually. So I need to find the volume builder, place this inside of it. I'm going to change the voxel size to 0.2 again, because I believe that's what we did for our castle. And then I'm going to need a voxel mesher. So extensions, RKT Voxel mesher, place that inside of there. And you can see what our stylized bumper looks like. So that's fun. Now the tricky thing about this is that the voxel mesher and the volume builder, we need to reset transform both of these. Now that we've seen what it looks like inside of the bumper null, just so that everything's in the same place. So volume builder goes inside of the volume mesher, and then the bumper goes inside the volume builder, and now we gotta name these. Volume builder bumper. Then we're gonna name this volume builder bumper. And then I'd like to make instances of this object so that you don't have to rerun these calculations every single time. So I'm going to use Shift-C and look up instance. And we just need a normal instance. I don't think we need a Mo instance unless we animate these with MoGraph. And I'm not sure at this time if I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll use the Mo instance just in case. I'm going to add this down here so I can use it more than once. And I'll click it, and now we have a Mo instance of the bumper. And I'm going to want 3 of these, so I'm going to hold Control and duplicate this and make another one. So you can kind of see these here. I'm going to close the asset browser so that these are a little bit bigger on our screen. We got our bumpers in here. I'm going to rotate this one. The other nice thing about this is once we start colorizing these, it'll colorize all of them. So I think this is a good place to stop for right now. In the next episode, we're going to be working on 3D modeling the treasure chest, as well as adding a little starfish to the top of the octopus's head, and working on adding in buttons and other little details to the pinball machine itself. So I'm super pumped up for that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please hit subscribe to be notified when the next episodes come out. And if you have any questions or any thoughts on this project, please feel welcome to leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you here next time.